Okay, everyone, we did a self-assessment inventory to figure out what types of jobs would be the best fit for our personalities, interests, and abilities. And now we're going to discuss a little bit about different types of work that we are being offered. So before you decide what you'd like to do, before you've made your final decision, we've done a little research so we know what would be a good fit, but we have to determine what is the difference between full-time and part-time? Those are two pretty big distinctions. And what's the difference versus a paid and unpaid position? So full-time and part-time are pretty easy to understand. Part-time is an employee who works an average of less than 30 hours a week. So if you work 5, 6, 10, 20, up to 30, you're considered part-time. A full-time employee is an employee who works an average of at least 30 hours a week. So anything more than 30 hours, a typical work week is 40. That's 8 hours a day for 5 days straight. That's what typically is full-time. So again, part-time is under 30, full-time is 30 and more. Paid versus unpaid work. So when it's paid, there are hopefully other benefits like insurance, etc. You get either a salary or an hourly wage. Unpaid is when an employee is not given any monetary compensation for their work. So basically, you're getting some experience. Maybe you're doing an internship or you're volunteering. You don't get any money for it at the end of the day. Don't forget to write the underlined words down. They are underlined in this chapter if they're considered vocabulary. Here are 4 you can put into your notes for Unit 1. These are different types of pay. So you can get a wage. That's what a employer might call your paycheck. And you're paid a set amount for every hour that you work. So let's just say the minimum wage is $8.65 or $8.75 currently. For every hour you work, you get that $8.65 or 75 cents. That's your wage. The size of your paycheck is going to depend on how much you work. So if you're a part-time worker and you work under 30 hours, it's $8.75 times 30. The salary is the amount that you're offered, an annual amount for a full value of your work, could be paid to you monthly or yearly. You might already have this term in your notes, so you don't have to write this definition, but you do have to understand that the size of your paycheck when you get a salary is divided by the number of pay periods. So if you're paid every month, you're getting paid 12 times. So they take your salary and they divide it by 12. It's always going to be the same amount. And there are pros and cons for each, which we'll discuss after the video. A stipend, which is the third type of pay, is a paid amount for the task that you do. So maybe you're paid in one check, or it could be spread out amongst many checks, but it's for a specific job. So the teachers in the school that advise a club get what's called a stipend. So I could have a club meeting twice a week, or I could have a club meeting once a week, or I could have a club meeting once a month. I'm going to be paid a stipend for whatever job I do. So it doesn't matter how many hours I work. So if someone has to come in and fix your bathroom and they're going to put in a new sink and a new floor, it doesn't matter if it takes 1 week or 1 month. It's a stipend amount. It's an agreed upon amount that doesn't get to change. You can put the term commission and tips together in your vocabulary. And commission and tips is the money that you make based on your performance. So at the end of a visit to a restaurant, you might tip the waitress or waiter, depending on if they did a good job or not to serve you your food. If you are going to sell cars or sell furniture, you get a commission for every car you sell. So you get a little money per car. So those are the 4 types of ways that people do get the pay for the job that they do. Unpaid work, it's very different. So if you volunteer, part-time usually, you want to be helpful, but you don't necessarily want to be paid, or you're not sure if you want to work in that field, so you're volunteering just to kind of get some experience. An intern is a little bit different, even though you're not being paid as an intern in most cases. It's somebody who is a student or a trainee who will work at a trade or an occupation to get work experience. So when I decided I wanted to be a teacher, I was an intern, I was a student teacher. So I already knew I wanted to be a teacher. I didn't volunteer to shadow a teacher. I knew I wanted to do it and I was already taking classes. Sometimes internships can be paid, and sometimes internships can lead to you being offered a job. Any way you spin it, an internship is connected to a career, whereas volunteering is more like you're just doing something nice for someone. Based on what you've learned, what type of work do you think you're currently most interested in? Would you want to be full-time or part-time, paid or unpaid? And why do you think that's a good idea? If you have decided what you wanted to do, paid or unpaid, you decided the type of job you wanted to do, there are many different ways to get that job, starting with going to your school counselor or a placement center. So the counseling office, SPS downstairs, can help you look into some career choices, and they help you get a part or a full-time job. There's also a transition coordinator here at the high school that could do the same. And what they might do is either find something that's paid or find something that's called a cooperative education. And this term in blue should definitely go into your vocabulary. It's a program where students attend classes part of the day, and then they go to a job to observe sometimes. So it's not every day. So if you were a student who wanted to be a, let's see, landscaper, I'll use that example again, or maybe you wanted to be an artist, you would probably take art classes during the day in a cooperative education setting, and then you might go work at an art gallery 1 or 2 days a week or at night. And same thing, if you wanted to be a landscaper, you might take classes during the day to learn about different plants, but then at night or on the weekends, you might actually go to different job sites to see what a landscaper does or help a landscaper actually do their job. The other places that you can use to find jobs are employment agencies. And this is typically not something students do. This is typically something that an adult would do. So an employment agency helps a job seeker find a job that's a good fit for them. You go in, you sit down, they ask you a bunch of questions. They might have you take a little test just so they can find out more about you. And then they'll call you and say, hey, I got a job that fits your personality perfectly. A headhunter is a little bit different. A headhunter is a type of employment agency that seeks out highly qualified people to fill positions. So the definition gets a little tricky, but here's the example. Maybe you're a headhunter for Google, meaning that when Google wants to have a new app, maybe Google wants to open an app that shows you how to buy a car. They need someone who's an expert on cars. So the headhunter for Google goes out and looks at a bunch of people's resumes and asks around and finds an expert on cars and then offers them a job. The employment agency is working for the people who need a job. The headhunters are working for the companies that have openings. Lastly, there's something called a temporary agency, also called a temp agency, and it provides a full-time or a part-time job for someone for a temporary amount of time. And we all know what temporary is. It's not forever. So maybe you're a teacher and you don't work during the summer, so you go to a temp agency and they find you a job just for the July and August month that you're off. Or maybe you quit your job because you decided you don't like that kind of work anymore. And before you get another big job, you go to a temp agency and you say, hey, I just want to try out working at a school, or I just want to try out working at a mall. Can you get me a job there? And this way I can experience it and see if I really like it before I do it permanently. There's online job information once you figured out what you want to do. So you've decided you definitely want to work at a paid job, you want to work at a part-time job, and you want to do something that involves, say, art. So you go online and you look at different online career and employment sites like monster.com or jobhunters.com or indeed.com. You could look at newspaper websites as well, Like sometimes in the South Brunswick patch, they talk about job openings. If you know you want to work for a specific company, you could go to their website. Like you could go to Apple's website and look for the employee or employment opportunities, or you could go to a professional association website. So there are websites that strictly find jobs for people. We talked about this in the last slide, and we're going to talk about it just one more time, your work history. A careful search can land you a job you'll enjoy for many years, and you want to keep track of that particular job. That particular record of your job is called your work history. You have this term already written down in your vocabulary, so you don't need to write it again, but your employers will evaluate your work history when you actually sit down across the table from them in an interview. Take your time and do what it takes to find the right job. Take time to do what is necessary to find the right job. That's the end of the slides for chapter 1-3. So we're still working on unit 1, but we're closer to the end.